Dr. Major called this a preemptive onslaught against the independence of the lower chamber and said it was a move that attempted to usurp the authority of the Speaker. Viewing this as contemptuous to the House of Assembly, Dr. Major said he stood ready to have persons brought to the bar of the House if necessary in defense of Parliament and its freedoms. In his first public dismissal of the April 21st interlocutory injunction granted by Justice Indra Charles, Dr. Major was stern in denouncing the order. He said while the Office of the Attorney General seeks to have the injunction set aside, Parliament would continue to function as it wishes. He added that he was unaware of anywhere in the Commonwealth where the court is allowed to curtail the actions of Parliament. The injunction, which lasts until May 12th, sought to restrain Foreign Affairs and Immigration Minister Fred Mitchell, Education Minister Jerome Fitzgerald, and Attorney General Alison Maynard Gibson from any further appropriation, perusal, use, publication, or disclosure in Parliament or anywhere else of correspondence, including emails belonging to STB. Staff members at the Department of Social Services participated in a fraudulent scheme in which they used food coupons intended for Bahamians on welfare to purchase groceries, according to Auditor General Terrence Bastian. The audit, covering the period July 1, 2013 to June 30th, 2015, and tabled in Parliament on Monday, exposes a litany of internal weaknesses in the Department of Social Services Accounting Department and raises questions about how effectively top officials were providing oversight and management during the period in question. Regarding the fraudulent scheme that saw several employees purchase groceries using food coupons, an investigation into the matter resulted in the termination of one staff member, while two others have been placed on administrative leave. Some of the pre-printed food coupons used in the scheme were for businesses that no longer exist, such as Stop and Shop Grocers, Mr. Bastian said. By using the coupons for 10 different clients, several employees of the DOSS were able to obtain grocery items on August 30th, 2015. In his report, Mr. Bastian said the store's name as printed on the coupons had been manually crossed out and replaced with an existing food store's name. There was no authorizing signature on the coupons when they were used by the DOSS staff members. As a result of the supposed acts between the food store personnel and the aforementioned DOSS staff members, these staff members were able to use the unsigned coupons to obtain grocery items. In fact, when management of Stop and Shop Grocers recognized discrepancies with the coupons, a senior member of the DOSS collected them from an employee of the store, promising to have them signed. The employee, described as a senior DOSS account staff member, had access to the signature stamping machine of the department's director and used it to stamp the director's signature on the coupons. The employee later delivered the coupons to the food store's accounts department for processing. House Speaker Dr. Kendall Major this week spoke in very frank terms, saying he was offended by a recent Supreme Court injunction to save the Bays, barring members of Parliament from disclosing that organization's personal information. The Attorney General charged that those in support of the upcoming referendum will not live our lives around a what if. Mrs. Maynard Gibson, speaking with reporters on Thursday, said the concerns recently launched by a specific group of pastors over the Fourth Constitutional Amendment bill are not an issue as far as the referendum on gender equality is concerned, stating that the laws of the Bahamas unequivocally do not provide for same-sex marriages. Furthermore, Mrs. Maynard Gibson insisted that the upcoming gender equality referendum is not about gay marriage, as some may fear, but is solely about ending the discrimination in our Constitution and making sure that we rid ourselves of women as second-class citizens. Ultimately, Mrs. Maynard Gibson said the proposed change of Bill 4 is not a big deal, adding that it is a very small change and it's a common sense change. Last week, Save Our Bahamas, the group that opposed the 2013 gambling referendum, launched a Vote No campaign against the Fourth Constitutional Amendment bill. As currently worded, Bill 4 seeks to eliminate discrimination in the Constitution based on sex, which has been defined as being male or female by inserting the word sex into Article 26. However, the group said it is convinced, given the precedent set in other countries, that the fourth bill would open the door to legitimizing same-sex marriage in the Bahamas, despite the government's continued assurances that it would not. The pastors associated with Save Our Bahamas have contended that the terms sex and being male or female allows for various interpretations of the phrase. Furthermore, the group has agitated for the government to include the words born male and born female into the fourth bill, suggesting that the phrases would further provide the necessary protection against same-sex marriage. Bahamas Transgender Intersex United, BTIU, on Tuesday launched its multi-level equality campaign, Bahamian Trans Lives Matter, which seeks to secure equal rights for transgendered Bahamians as the debate about the upcoming gender equality referendum continues. During a press conference at the Hilton, BTIU representatives called on the Christie administration to ensure that the fundamental rights of all genders of Bahamians, male, female, and transgendered, are protected. However, the group stressed that it is not trying to shift the focus from the gender equality referendum. The group is calling for equal access to healthcare, education, and employment without discrimination. Lead spokesperson for the group, Alexis DeMarco, affirmed that members of BTIU and to a greater extent those in the wider lesbian, bisexual, gay, and transgender community are forced to live in unwarranted circumstances due to the confines of socially accepted behaviors in the Bahamas. According to the self-proclaimed First Lady of the LGBT community, scores of transgendered and intersex men and women are being discriminated on their jobs, in schools, and in other social groupings because of this well-endorsed stigma. Ms. DeMarco said, quote, "The conversation needed to come about because discrimination exists on all levels. If we are talking about equality, we have to go across the board for all Bahamians. The word equal, that's the key word. Why are you going to discriminate against one set of people and another set of people get all the privileges? That's discrimination. I am glad the topic of the referendum and all of that has come about because we live in La La Land in this country. Unless we come forward as humans and Bahamians and stand up for our own rights, things will never begin to move forward and change," end quote. Ms. DeMarco labeled those opposing the rights and privilege of transgender and intersex Bahamians as modern-day oppressors. After an aggressive polling exercise of this country's 38 members of parliament, several of them revealed that they had failed to meet the March 1st deadline to file their financial declarations. More than a dozen members of parliament have failed to file financial declarations by the March 1st deadline as is required by the Public Disclosure Act, according to the MPs who were polled by the Tribune. When asked about this issue last week, Prime Minister Perry Christie did not answer questions on whether he was in breach of the law. Instead, he deflected to another matter. Meanwhile, Deputy Prime Minister Philip Brave Davis said he was unsure, but added that he would check the status of his disclosures with his accountant. Mr. Davis said, quote, "I know I signed something a couple of weeks ago, but I am not sure if it was for this year or last year. I will check with my accountant," end quote. This comes amid increased calls from the public for elected officials and senators to face penalties for failing to file the annual financial declarations. It also follows a recent U.S. State Department report that highlighted the subject of corruption and government transparency. The 2015 country report on human rights practices in this country further took issue that there was no independent verification of annual public disclosures from senior public officials and called the annual submission rate weak unless it was an election year. According to the Public Disclosures Act, a summary of the declarations shall be published in a gazette, and any person who does not comply with the law is liable to a fine not exceeding $10,000 or imprisonment of not more than 2 years. If a parliamentarian deliberately does not disclose property owned in the Bahamas, the land can be seized and forfeited to the government. Speaking to the Tribune, Public Disclosure Commission Chairman Miles LaRota was adamant that the decision to prosecute someone for breaching the act is left up to the discretion of the Office of the Attorney General. Explaining that the Commission's power is basically limited to writing, Mr. LaRota maintained that the Attorney General would have to give the nod on whether a member of Parliament or top-ranking civil servant would face charges over failing to adhere to the stipulations in the Public Disclosure Act. However, he revealed that there were a few MPs and senators who have not declared for the year 2014, and there were even more of them that were outstanding for the year 2015. The Tribune contacted Mr. LaRota after polling the majority of this country's 38 members of parliament on whether they were current in filing the financial documents. Want to get in on the discussion? Well, here's how you can. Just log on to our website at www.tribune242.com. Like us on Facebook at the Tribune News Network. Send us a tweet, Tribune242, or subscribe to our YouTube page, Tribune242.